Good evening and welcome to another episode of VI Voices. I'm Emil Henderson III. Along with me, my co-hosts, Clint Ferris and Gwen McFarlane. Nellie Nelson Tanghao has the night off. Tonight we're bringing you a discussion on the right to bear arms that are found in the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution and whether or not there needs to be some regulation in light of all the gun violence that has been going on, plaguing not only our community but nationally. Tonight on our show we're going to have two individuals who have been in much debate on Facebook in discussions on whether or not there should be regulations on the Second Amendment right to bear arms or whether the Second Amendment right should go on unrestricted. Tonight, first we begin with Eugene Peterson, who will take the position that there should be regulation. And we'll just have this discussion and we'll return after discussing with him with Mr. John Canegata, who will discuss the issues regarding the innate and fundamental right to bear arms. So, welcome, Mr. Peterson. This is your first time on VI Voices.
Yes, good evening.
Well, we thank you for coming on to the show to have this discussion. And as you know, we invited both you and John because on Facebook, you all have been going back and forth on this issue regarding the right to bear arms that we find under our United States Constitution, which is applicable to the Virgin Islands through the Revised Organic Act of 1954. So tell us a little bit about what your position is in regards to this issue of right to bear arms.
Well, good evening again. And first I'd like to recognize the fact that that there is a problem. I think that we could, you're an attorney, we could stipulate that.
Yes.
That there is a problem with humans or people using guns to kill or maim other humans, other people. Recently, in the last 10 or 15 years, that has escalated to mass murder situations where indiscriminately people are using guns, especially guns, to commit these mass murders. Recently, the Newtown, Connecticut situation, we are very familiar with that, and we're familiar with one in Europe where I don't remember the details, but we're familiar with those. The question is that how do we control it? And many of the proponents of deregulation of gun in response to the Second Amendment of the U.S. Constitution feel that it's people that use guns to kill other people, and the gun just doesn't jump up and start killing people. And we're familiar with that argument, and essentially it is true. But the way that I look at it is that if for you mathematicians out there, if you will, there's just this common denominator, and I guess you could use the two items of humans and guns put together. They're the common denominator in all of these incidences. And so we can't do anything with humans. We can't kill off all the humans. No. You know what? We do it exactly what we say we're trying to avoid. So the other thing is we need to look at the guns.
Well, what do you say for those individuals who believe that they have an inherent fundamental right to bear arms?
No, it's a constitutional right. A constitutional right was given to the citizens of the United States to bear arms at a time when there were a need for bearing arms. And as you know, the Constitution could change. There's a thing called amendment to the Constitution. And also the Constitution can be interpreted, and there's a lot of room within the Second Amendment for interpretation, as for instance, whether there can be regulations or not. As you know, there's been a recent ruling, I think in the last day or two, that a federal judge has said, yes, it can be regulated. And of course, the times, when times changes and the people decide that there's no longer a need, they usually will either propose amendment to the Constitution or the Supreme Court will be a little bit more lenient in a particular issue, and in this particular case, I believe that's the case. I think that we need to, again, look at what we can do about guns. I don't necessarily think that I have all the answers, but we need to look at what we can do about guns and the use of guns and the regulations of guns, whether you're regulating the type of guns that are being used, the type of ammunition that are being used, and also the education of the people that are allowed to to carry guns and registration, etc., things like that.
But let me ask this: do you think that gun regulation is mutually exclusive to the right to bear arms? Because that seems to be, at least from what I can gather, seems to be the argument that the NRA officials are making, that somehow by regulating guns, you are somehow removing, slowly or chipping away at my right to bear arms.
Right. That's their argument, and I'm not gonna make their argument for them. But I do. Like I said, I stipulate that that there is a problem and that there is the Constitution, the Second Amendment that allows the right to bear arms, and we have to look at it. I think that that is well, I guess the phrase that people use now is creating a straw man. You know, where they say, oh, if you go after regulation, then once you achieve regulation, then the next thing is to abolish and things like that. Well, we could stipulate that type of thing. We could, you know, we could say, no, the purpose is not to abolish. We recognize that that's unattainable, and we have experience with trying to abolish certain items, and they will bring up the argument of regulated and abolishing drugs that been a total failure.
Absolutely.
And the same thing with alcohol in the past. And so we have to look at it from a different eye's mind as to how we can regulate this guns in a reasonable manner. And again, I won't say I'm strongly against the abolition of gun, because I would really love for that to happen, but I recognize the fact that it's something that's not achievable.
Okay, so are you saying that you said, based on your comment or your response just now, you said that the Second Amendment came into play because there was a need for people to bear arms at the time. Right. So are you saying that currently there would be those amongst us who said there's still a need to bear arms? So well, we should totally abolish it?
Yeah, so that's why I'm saying I don't think abolition is the answer.
You answer regulations.
Yeah, regulation and other things, you know, education and things like that. I could use the example of the country of Switzerland. They have a free society when it comes to guns. They actually issue guns. They insist that all the citizens have guns. The government issue guns to their citizens. But you have to go through a strict training. You have to go through strict training, and they weed out the ones that are problematic. So if you have mental problems, things like that, or you will not be allowed to have a gun. And you still could go up, beside having the government issue guns, you still could go out and buy extra guns of your own. So it's not, and a lot of opponents of regulation use this as an example. Well, Switzerland have unlimited or unrestricted use of guns, but that's not true. The fact is that you have to license, relicense, you have to train, you have to be familiar, and if you don't pass muster, you're not included. And the reason that they have done this is because they don't have a standing military, pretty much the way we were when the Constitution was written. And they don't have a standing military, so they feel that it's necessary, that it may become necessary at some point, that they may have to hustle up a quick military and a quick militia for immediate protection, if the need arises. So that's why they feel that and of course, needless to say, they have a low gun crime rate and all that.
But Doc, what say you? And now, ever so often we hear a clamor, a loud noise to restrain gun ownership. Yeah. Because, for instance, you mentioned what took place in Connecticut. Then what took place overseas, I think, in one of the Scandinavian countries. Yeah, ever so often you hear that loud noise. Let's restrain guns and this type of guns we have. Right. Is it just cyclical, and when whatever has gone down and died, we don't hear it again politically another 10 months if we don't see a mass killing?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I'm glad you brought that up, because I've always said that almost on every issue, and you could think in any hot button issue, that we usually swing the pendulum from one side to the next. So if an issue comes up, such as this with guns, the problem with guns, we want to eliminate it, we want to get rid of it, and we know that that's not going to be attainable. And there are several other things that where you go from one end to the next, the abortion issue, things like that. So I believe that that yes, you're correct in the sense that when the issue comes up, an incident comes up, and it triggers this outcry, then it's a hot button issue for the moment. But as soon as it calms down, I take for instance the incident of the high price in gas. If you were around in the 80s when the price of gas went down, there was an outcry. Get the prices down, and as soon as the gas companies lowered the prices a little bit, they quieted down, and then they sneak it up again. The outcry came again, and they dropped it a little bit again, and they've been playing that for quite some time. So you're correct that as soon as the issue becomes a hot button issue, then it comes to the forefront.
Now, the other side of the argument, yes, is that, we believe in the Second Amendment. Yeah. It's a right guaranteed by the Constitution. But what about these guns that are now more than a semi-automatic, more than just a simple handgun, a Glock with 18 bullets? Those guns that are used in mass killings.
Yeah, high capacity
weapons. Yeah. With high magazines, and something that are paramilitary or military
type weapons
in style. Yeah. Now, your position on that is that should they be banned, or?
Well, that's what we're driving at. I think that these weapons that have no use, absolutely. As a matter of fact, let me make the statement now that it is my belief that guns are the only tool that humans have for killing and for no other use. If you say target practice, that's just practicing to be more accurate when you kill.
More efficient.
That's rough. That's kind of rough.
No, that's rough?
Yeah, I mean, to equate that it is the tool that we just use to kill. What about those people who say that, okay, I take that back. You're not limiting it to killing humans, you're just saying kill period.
Kill period.
Because even in hunting, that's what you're actually doing, you're killing. Okay, so I take that back, okay.
Yeah, and kill and maim. And so, whether it's militarily or, so people, some of the proponents of, or opponents of gun regulation will say, well, more people die from wives killing their husband with a hammer than, but a hammer has a use. Have a purpose. More people die in plane crash, or more people die in car accident, but obviously those they have other uses other than killing. Now, when there is a need for protection, and I would grant that, and so a person should be able to protect themselves at their maximum level. So you could have a knife or something like that to try and protect yourself, but there's no use bringing a knife to a gunfight. So there is a need for the average citizen to be able to, if he feels a need to protect himself, and if in a regular or under certain circumstances he has a need to protect himself, then I think that he has a right to that. So with that, I'm thinking that there should be, or there will be, some guns that are allowed and regulated, but it goes along with the training and the proper use and the proper care and the security of the weapon. When it comes to assault weapons and hollow point bullets and armor penetrating bullets, things like that, and what they call the extra capacity magazine and stuff, they have no use in regular society. And so I think that they should be only used for special occasion, special occasion like an event. In special uses, people that are highly trained, like the SWAT teams and the military, and police security type thing. The average person whether sane or not, should not be able to have these weapons without some kind of need, you know.
But you know what I thought was very interesting? It really was not until 2010 that the people of the Virgin Islands even had a right to bear arms.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. The Second Amendment did not automatically apply to the Virgin Islands in the sense that it applied to the citizens who actually lived in the United States.
Oh, yeah?
And it was a case in 2008 out of St. Thomas that Judge Gomez issued a ruling that said where a gentleman actually challenged his arrest under our local unlawful possession statute by saying he had a fundamental right to possess arms. And the court ruled that no, you don't, because Congress had not specifically issued that fundamental right. It does say that the first, Bill of Rights all apply to us, and we have just basically read it to mean, oh, I guess it all does.
Right.
But there are certain amendments that didn't flow through the Second Amendment directly, and that was a part of other states as well. It wasn't until Heller in 2010 the United States Supreme Court says all of those fundamental rights flow through the 14th Amendment right.
Yeah.
And that's at that point is how we were then able to really claim in the Virgin Islands that we had a right to bear arms. But ordinarily before we really didn't have a right to bear arms. We do now, and I bring up Heller because it's amazing that that's the case in addition to City of Chicago versus McDonald, which basically says, yes, we can regulate, governments can regulate the use of guns, and you don't have an unfettered right to possess or to bear arms.
Right.
And what makes those decisions so important was Justice Scalia wrote it. I mean, him and Alito, which are probably two of the most conservative judges on the Supreme Court, who you would have thought would have said, sure, everybody can have guns. And they didn't.
Yeah.
And so, for here, we have some of the strictest gun laws in any United States jurisdiction, but we have some of the highest gun crimes of any other jurisdiction. So how do we play that? Where we have these regulations, but they don't seem to equate with reducing gun violence.
Well, you're not going to reduce gun violence by just having the laws on the book. And again, we're sort of honing in on the mass murders. Now, we're lucky that we have not had that in the territory thus far.
Right.
But let me tell you, I'm afraid that it's coming. I pray that it doesn't. Last night the power went off. I don't know if you still live in Frederickson, but the power went off last night for about 2 to 3 hours. And the type of discharges that I heard from weapons, I'm not talking about the usual tat, tat, no more. This is a
oh wow! Maybe John Canegata was in Frederickson last night. I don't know. Utilizing one of his weapons.
Yeah. See, and so it tells me that the weapons are out there and they're close by. They're among us, and it's just a matter of
and not manufactured here. You cannot manufacture any weapon here. I mean, we don't have a manufacturing plant that manufactures weapons, but we have so many weapons in the territory.
That mention about having all of these laws on the books, and we do have them on the books. But and you mentioned also that we can't expect crime to the incidence of gun crime to be reduced by just having the laws on the books.
That's right.
Are you now talking about enforcement and a vigorous enforcement of the laws as well as maybe the borders to track these weapons coming in, going out, and the movement of these weapons in the Virgin Islands? Yeah,
they need to research that. We hear a lot of rumors about coming in on trailers and in planes and caskets and all kind of stuff, but I have not seen any proof of that. I have not seen an arrest or a bust where somebody coming in with bringing in such weapons in parts or in total and got busted. We just hear about it.
How there's going to be an arrest or a bust if they're nobody enforced?
Well, that's what I'm saying. So we need to look at that. We need to look at the registration. We need to, like you said, the law. Maybe I don't know how detailed the rules and regs are, but we need to say you bought a gun 2 years ago. Send you send out a mass mailing that the people who bought guns and prove that you still have that gun, or what you did with it. That's it. That should be simple enough. You're going to find, I'm sure you're going to find people that bought multiple guns. One of their friends said, "Listen, I like that gun. It feels good in my hand." And they said, "Hey man, give me $200." And there's no paperwork exchange or anything like that. We need to control that so that it doesn't fall in the wrong hand. We need to, I think it's a crime if you have a stolen weapon and you don't report it. I think we need to, and this will bring that out. You bought a gun 2 years ago, where is it? That type of thing. You have to register your car every year. I'm not suggesting that you register your gun every year, but again, you show that you have the gun and that is in good condition, and you have your security set up to protect the gun from your family members who are not allowed to have the gun, but it's in the house with them, and they know where it is.
But shouldn't you? But I've heard that the process is as simple as if you lose your gun, you just file a police report and it's an affidavit saying that, okay, someone stole my gun and that's it.
Yeah, but they're just like any other crime, there should be some investigation.
But that doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen.
That doesn't happen. They're just well, again.
Because you see, one of the issues that I can perceive is happening is that you have someone A goes and gets a gun, they register the gun, they have the gun, and then A sells the gun to B, and goes to the police and say, "Oh, my gun was stolen," or "Oh, I can't find my gun." So they know full well, and that's what we call the straw people.
Yeah.
And that's why they're trying to get this federal legislation to deal with straw individuals who go in and purchase weapons for other people who otherwise could not purchase a weapon.
So
that's something that would work here.
And that should already be in the books. You go in, person A sells his gun to person B and reports it as stolen. Well, you're careless. You know, because your gun was stolen. You got 4 other guns. We're taking those because you don't have the proper facilities. So that couple of things will happen there is that, hey, I want to have a gun. I'm not going to sell you my gun and then lose my rights to have other guns. And so there things like that. I think follow up things like that could be could be done to try and get some of these guns off the street. I think the program of turning in your gun, no questions asked, we've seen that to be pretty successful, where a couple of hundred guns at some point, sometimes get turned in, and what happened to those guns, we don't know. If some chain of custody needs to be followed there. We hear of guns being stolen right out of the evidence room and things like that. But we need to have some kind of control, and then put some team in place that would at least investigate some of these rumors that we hear, to give us the confidence that it either is happening and we're going to do something about it, or no, it's just a rumor that it really isn't happening. So we only got about 10 funeral homes in the Virgin Islands. So if everybody's saying that guns are coming in caskets and stuff like that, then check it out.
But may I ask, isn't there some level of bias in gun laws and gun regulation throughout the country? Because take for instance, I think T.I. got sent to jail on a gun crime, but it was because he was a felon. But if T.I. wasn't a felon, wouldn't that just have been a slap on the wrist of him owning all of those guns and then reselling them? Now, I'm bringing that to say, like, gun trafficking is not even a federal crime. Whereas
it's not even a local crime.
I hear that it's not even a local crime, but if you traffic a little bit of weed, if you sell a little bit of weed, that's considered.
Yeah, well, it's all what's on the book and what they want to enforce. We should know by now from our experience that trying to control a little bit of weed, or even a lot of weed, is kind of fruitless. Where it's a no. Even if you're successful in arresting the person, then you got to incarcerate them and pay that expense and stuff like that.
But for me, I believe that marijuana should be treated as a civil penalty if it's the kind of that you have that's for you to use in your house, it should be a civil penalty. Well, if you get caught outside of your house, it should be a civil penalty for that. But I also think that for drug crimes, we should treat it for what it is, as an illness, as opposed to treating it as a penal crime against society. And I think that's what happens. A lot of the people who are in jail for a great many of them that are in jail for drug crimes are individuals who are on drugs, more so than those who are selling it to people. And that's the problem I have with the way that we look or that we balance gun crimes with drugs. Now, you get people hauling for gun crimes if it's connected to a drug issue. But if it's not connected to a drug issue, it's really difficult.
Correct.
Because you're right, we don't have gun trafficking laws.
But even look at the laws and the books. Think about, again, look at the bias. Think about where a lot of the people who may be caught with a gun illegally live. Some of them live in relatively close proximity to schools. Look at the housing communities, and then bam, 1,000 feet within a school, that's a federal crime. So I do see some level of bias.
And a local.
And a local crime.
But the local crime is much more stringent than the federal one. Here at least.
But you do see the bias.
What I want to know is how effective do you think it is to be enforced, to come up with new regulations and new laws on the books? How effective is it going to be against the lawless, and two, the guns that are already on the streets? How effective do you think that's going to be?
I think. I'm sorry.
Yes, one more question. Now, where should we be pointing the laws towards, or who should we point it towards, or who should be held responsible for providing it? Like you talk about the manufacturers not having.
Guns not being
we don't manufacture them here.
Who should we point that towards?
Well, like I said, we need to find out really and truly for sure how they're coming in. Maybe they know and they're not saying, but whoever the authority need to find that out and see what we can do about stopping that. I think, again, we have enough laws, and I don't know the one with assault weapon. I don't know in the Gordon Island what the laws are with that, but if we need to create any laws, I think that's the one that need to be looked at now, and of course the high capacity magazine and the special bullets and stuff like that. Those needs to be somehow or the other get off the market and try to get it under control, and in trying to control the other registration and the education of the people that are getting the guns, and enforcing the casual sale of guns and stuff like that. I think those will go a long way in the long run. But and the thing that I'm trying to prevent from happening here in the North Island is that mass killing that I think is somewhere down the pike.
No, you're right. But what I think is important is for us to maybe do one of those audits onto our books. And I say that because we do have dealers laws and ammunition, dealers meaning for guns and ammunition, where gun dealers have to specifically report to whom they sold the weapon to, what the serial number was for that weapon, and they have to report to the VIPD. An ammunition dealer also has these requirements, meaning they can't sell ammunition to someone unless they produce an actual valid license to possess a weapon. But they also have to register the ammunition by serial number to whom they sell it to. If it's 1 through 12, it was sold to you. So if it shows up somewhere, then you know that this dealer is who sold it and to whom he sold it.
Right.
The question is whether or not that's even happening.
Right.
So you can go back and trace out. We have those. The issue is whether or not we have been following up with those laws.
Yeah, well, I'll take this opportunity to say that when John comes on, he'll probably be able to answer that a little bit better. And I say that because I am a pro-business person, and I believe that John and some of his partners are in business as a gun dealer and salesperson. And it pains me a bit to talk about this against a business entity, but it is far-reaching, and I think that with some meeting of the heads, I think that we could come up with some solution to at least give us the even if it's only the perception of being a little bit safer. They say a perception is 100%. So.
Well, Doc, I want to thank you for coming on the show tonight. We are going to have you back on a subsequent show with John, same time. But we're going to have you back to discuss together what's happening. And when we return, we will have with us John Canegata, who is a proponent for the inherent fundamental right to bear arms. We'll be back in a moment. Good evening and welcome back to VI Voices. We have with us John Canegata, who will be discussing the issues regarding this inherent fundamental right to bear arms and why certain types of gun regulations, or at least the argument regarding gun regulations, really is unfounded and shouldn't be done, since we have this fundamental right to bear arms under the Second Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. Welcome to the show, John. This is not your first time on the show, so we are familiar with you, and our audience is familiar with you, as you ran for a seat in the 30th legislature of the Virgin Islands.
I did.
So talk to us a little bit about your position regarding the Second Amendment right to bear arms.
Well, I don't think I'm completely against any type of regulation. I believe there should be some regulation, but I don't think the Constitution in of itself gives me that inherent right to protect myself. I don't think it's an inalienable right. I think it's a God-given right. And I don't need a document or a judge or someone to say, hey, John, you can defend yourself or your family. I think that's a right given to all human beings.
Explain to me, why you think it's a God-given right to possess weapons or a gun?
If we were to go back to some of the biblical references, even the Torah, the Bible itself, on the Tractus Gradus, where it says, if a man came to kill you, get up first and kill himself. So
why do we have a right to bear slingshots?
Well, you do have a right to bear slingshots.
Okay.
I just don't think it's an effective tool when somebody comes with an AK-47 with a knife or machete. It's easy to defend yourself. And it did work in the days with David and Goliath. It might not work today.
Right. What is the purpose of the AK-47?
The AK-47?
Why would someone else have the AK-47 who comes out?
AK-47 was created by Canegata, was a Russian gun designer. It was primarily a military-style firearm. At that time, it was fully automatic, which it was used in military. Now they've made a civilian version of it where they're semi-automatic, and a lot of sportsmen enjoy shooting firearms like the AK-47.
A lot of sportsmen also are aware of how to make it fully automatic.
I have been involved in the firearm business pretty much all my life. I've been a shooter from a very young age. I know a lot about the ins and outs of firearms.
Yes, sir.
A law was recently passed by, I think, Senator Sampson was the initiator of that spoke about that. I have absolutely no understanding of how to convert a semi-automatic to a fully automatic firearm. I think it takes an engineer. Has it been done? No one has proven that to me. I know firearms that malfunction have a tendency to go fully auto, but it's uncontrollable, it's unsafe.
Go ahead. That's a question.
Sure.
Is it sportsmanlike to shoot a deer 10 times?
No, sir.
But so is it humane to shoot a human being 10 times?
It depends if the individual was on some type of narcotic and was still approaching you. I think it would be legal to shoot an individual 10 times if they were still coming at you.
And you see, and that's where I'm bringing the discussion, because we hear the gun proponents talk about, okay, we use it for sport, we ought to use it for protection.
Correct.
And wouldn't a rifle or a gun with 18 bullets, like a semi-automatic handgun, provide that same purpose versus a AK-47 or full assault rifle?
It depends. Obviously, you can defend yourself with any firearm. You might get that one lucky shot that happens to drop a 250-pound perpetrator with one shot. Unfortunately, it's not always like that. I lived in an area where a former attorney general, one of the people that worked in that office, had to discharge and shoot this gentleman twice in his chest. This individual, after being shot, was still able to run about 75 yards away. When adrenaline, when there's narcotics involved, it's hard for us to understand what actually takes place. At times you have to use several, like I said, multiple rounds, large calibers. It's not something we want to talk about, discuss, but it's a reality of the things we have to do.
But is it apropos for our community? Because if you think about the Constitution,
correct.
I think the preamble of the Constitution talks about the common defense of our common defense.
Okay.
And at that particular time, we knew that we were a militia state, that we had no standing army. Now, move 220 odd years forward, we are a country with a long-standing army, that is rather formidable.
Sure.
Do we still need the Second Amendment in the way it's being interpreted today?
Absolutely. And I'm going to go, so you guys stop at it or start at the Constitution and moving forward into modern history as we see it today. I'm going to go beyond that. What was the roots of the Constitution, especially the Second Amendment or our second article in the Bill of Rights? It actually goes back to the Iroquois Nation, at least part of it, where they talked about the personal defense of not just the Iroquois Nation, but of the individuals who were actually members of that nation, which happened to be our Native Americans or Indians, if you want to call them at that point. So I go way beyond that, back to the inherent right that an individual has a right to protect himself, not to be part of a militia.
But if we follow that argument, then the only people who have that fundamental right would be the Native Americans.
Well,
if we follow that, because clearly the Constitution was not written for the Native Americans.
It was not.
Much less the Africans. So we even have that. We even have that argument as well, when Africans were not even allowed.
But now we enjoy that. But actually those were racist type of laws that were, especially after the Civil War, where it talked about the only legal firearm to own was a Colt, a 45 Colt, where the average freed slave or African American at the time could not afford that. So we know that the racist roots of gun control, and that's why, particularly, I have a lot of strong opposition on individuals offer any type of control, because I think it's ineffective and I think it's have very racist
But do you believe, let me ask you this, Sean, you know, we have a lot of conservatives who are strict constructionists. Why should we not read the Second Amendment strictly, where they make reference to the fact that you have the right to bear arms for a well-regulated militia? Why should we read to mean that unless you plan to be in the military, you don't have the right to bear the arms? Or if you want to have the weapon, then you're pretty much like drafting yourself that if we need you to be hauled into the military to go. Why should we not look or interpret that Second Amendment in that way?
Sure. Well, I'm going to go back again to the intent of the Founding Fathers, who said it was an individual right. When you look at the other rights under the Bill of Rights, it talks about the right to free speech, the right to the free press, the right to have an attorney, the right to not have soldiers quartered during peacetime. All of these rights to speedy trial, those are all individual rights. And if we go back to Heller versus DC, or DC versus Heller, if we go back to Illinois or Chicago versus McDonald, if we go back to Kane versus Abel, these rights are interpreted, or even back to the Law Journal, oh my goodness, I'm sorry, the Yale Law Journal in 1989 edition, it talked about these being individual fundamental rights separate from laws that just govern over a state or the people in general.
But then if it is such that it is fundamental rights, why is it that certain states or the Supreme Court has said that then you can lose that fundamental right?
I think
if it's so fundamental that I should not be able to lose it.
So in regards to a criminal losing their civil rights,
right?
I think that takes us to a whole nother genre. I think at that point, hey, if you act un-American, if you act like the Constitution has no barriers in regards to committing crimes and violating other people's constitutional rights, I think at some point, hey, for that period of time when you're incarcerated or for life, you end up losing some of your rights. Second Amendment.
What about when you first started, you talk about God-given rights?
Correct.
So those persons who violated the law, who are ex-felonies or ex-convicts, they don't have a God-given right?
They do have that God-given right, but unfortunately, it'll be tough for them to acquire a firearm in prison. So at that point,
not in prison, I'm talking about
when they come out.
When they come out. Oh, okay. So you're talking about a convicted felon.
A convicted felon comes out and becomes a productive member of society again.
Correct.
And a contributing.
He has a God-given right to protect himself.
Correct.
Unfortunately, he doesn't have a legal right anymore to own a firearm. So I think there's a fine line. There's a fine line between that. I think as a result.
So you're not completely against the regulation of
not at all.
Weapons.
I truly believe that people who have mental illnesses should not be in possession of firearms. Absolutely.
Okay. So there's this discussion nationally where people, the NRA, are you a member of the NRA?
Yes, I am.
Are you a voting member?
I am a voter. I'm a patron.
I need for you to vote Mr. Lapierre out of office because he is not helping your.
Okay.
He is not helping your case. You have where it appears that even gun owners and even a large majority of NRA members agree that there should be some universal background checks on people before they can get weapons. Recently,
we've heard some of those individuals on the internet, especially on social media. I guess after the Newtown killing, that massacre, it struck a chord in a lot of people's hearts. We all feel the same way, but I don't think we're gonna give up our rights as a result of.
I'm not saying give up your rights,
okay.
But what I'm saying is just the basic issue of a background check for everybody.
Okay.
Why would anybody be against having a background check for any person that comes and wants to purchase a weapon?
there's a background check in every firearm transfer other than a private individual to individual sale.
Right, so why can't we have a universal background check?
How do you monitor that now? There's over 300 million firearms in the street.
Right.
There's individuals.
Well, we don't have universal background checks. That's the problem.
Not for individual sales between private parties. With any firearm transfer, there was an initial background check. If you ship a firearm to me that you own previously in the States, before I can turn that firearm over to you, I have to do a background check. So every gun dealer, even at the gun shows, have to do a background check. So there's a lot of misinformation. What there's people that sell firearms, their personal firearms, at a gun show in the parking lot. In those cases, they do not have to do a background check.
And why wouldn't legislation and why wouldn't law that preclude that be okay with the NRA members?
Well,
because it's not either it's okay with you all and Mr. Lapierre has not received a memo at your recent meeting, or he just doesn't care. And you all agree that those things are not appropriate.
The NRA holds a hard line stance against gun regulation. It's not going to make a difference. If we're trying to address violent crime, we need to address not the symptoms, but the true cause and root causes of violent crime.
Which would be what, in your opinion? And I know you're not here to speak for the NRA,
but absolutely.
What would that be?
The true cause, I believe, the lack of mentorship, the lack of education, especially for Hispanic and Black males in our community below the age of 30. So how I would do that, I would just destroy the Department of Education as is right now. I would restructure it to focus on young males, identify what causes them their interests. Definitely give them a basic arithmetic, comprehension, reading, writing, and then cater every other subject around that to really propel these guys to educate themselves. So at a later age, we can now give them a mentor to mentor them through these young, I guess, years where they're very impressionable, probably 12 to like 16.
But see, here's the problem I have with that argument. The problem I have with that argument is that
I think that's where we lose the males in America.
The people running around killing people in movie theaters and killing them at schools are not the people you just referenced.
But what about the kids right here in our community? So I brought it back to our community. I agree. When you talk about the Adam Lanzer,
and they came from regular people's houses. They weren't our color, and they came from regular houses with parents. And they went around killing people. And it was not people of our color or the age group of which you just discussed.
Doc Peterson mentioned that the common denominator was them having firearms. And actually, all these individuals we mentioned as recent masculines were under some type of psychological narcotic. You know,
that's
so
what
yes,
they
choose to have firearms.
Maybe leave out of that. That's what they said.
But all that you just said about the reasons why we have these violent crimes, couldn't we track it down to two things? Poverty and capitalism as we know it today?
I wouldn't say that. I know, some people say that because if you look to Haiti and you talk about poverty, that's it. Every male in Haiti should be a criminal because they're still poor. In Jamaica,
they're too sick to go out and get weapons to do anything.
Let's go to Jamaica then. Let's go to Jamaica.
But Jamaica has the highest incidence of crime.
It has one of the highest, right? But not every male Jamaican happens to be a criminal, right?
That's true.
But you see, you're taking that broadly in terms of, we're not saying everybody who are poverty, but poverty can't. Yeah, it's a variable.
It is a variable. I agree with you.
But isn't capitalism also a variable? Because take a look, the NRA can say they really love Obama because they have propped Obama up as the man who's going to regulate and restrain the Second Amendment. And from sometime after the election,
you're right.
The run and guns there's been a high demand.
2 elections back to back. In 2008, there were record gun sales, and now, prior to 2013, they're breaking every record in the book for firearm sales in the industry.
What was the election this year? November what? 7th?
November 7th, 6th or 7th, whenever we do it.
Well, I think the Republicans are still living on November 5th.
Okay.
I don't think y'all have figured out that loss. And so you're right. Gun sales when he won the second time
a little bit
went through the roof because everybody was running around thinking somehow there's going to be regulation. You go and get a gun. Which I think is somewhat, to me, so far from reality. I don't understand how we're living in a community with all that's going on that people would still think it's okay to have unfettered regulation of guns.
But there are regulations. So every firearm that was recently sold, right, a background check was done. So they know where the guns went, right? So you can trace that firearm sale to a serial number to an actual individual. So it is regulated, right? And they had to go through a background check that said, hey, I'm not mental, I've never committed an act of domestic violence, I've never renounced my citizenship, etc., to somewhat kind of prove to them that I'm an individual of good moral standing. So there was regulations in regards to those things.
But what do you feel? Like I said, you know, we talked about this with Doc on the issue regarding hunting, where people say, well, it's a sport. I've grown up my entire life hunting, and as a sport with my dad and my grandfather, and I should have the right to have my weapon and learn how to teach my children how to use a weapon. How do we balance that with what we're seeing in our community now, where guns are just rampant out there?
But the guns that are rampant, the ones you're concerned with is illegal firearms. So these individuals that are hunting, which I think is not just a great sport, it actually puts meat on the table. It actually teaches kids firearm safety from a very young age. I think we're actually mixing apples and oranges when we're talking about, okay, the hunting culture versus the guns that are rampant in the community actually committing
we're not.
Violence.
Your group is. Okay. Because remember, your group, when Mr. Lapierre is the ones trying to tie in this hunting
There's
sport
a lot of
thing.
other... Yes.
Yeah, but you're the one that's most vocal. Not you, but I mean the NRA that's most vocal about tying in this hunting right.
I don't think the NRA has actually mentioned. On the contrary, if you listen to the quotes recently, I think it's the most popular quote now, where they said it's not about duck hunting. You know, I think you've heard that on more than one occasion. So it's really about, like I said, the inherent right to defend yourself against some enemy, both foreign and domestic, or our government. They talk about tyranny. I go beyond that once again. I say, it's a God-given right.
And there are, when you said tyranny, so the audience understands what you're talking about, there is a segment of our community nationally who believe that they have to be prepared for when the government comes to do things to them to fight against the government, meaning the United States government.
Yes,
There's one of those people.
That's why gun sales went up in 2008 and went up again in 2010 because of who was running the government.
Right.
But I think you're right to some extent, and I can expand upon that.
But Mr. Canegata, you said it's not about the legal guns, but it's about the illegal guns.
Correct.
But doesn't most guns start out at a legal firearm and then end up being an illegal firearm? So shouldn't we talk about the legal guns that make their way from legality into illegality?
The guns that are manufactured within the United States that commit these crimes, yes. Have we seen fully automatic AK-47s commit crimes in violence? According to the police, yes, they use these firearms. I can tell you right now, any fully automatic firearm did not come from a legal transaction. Okay, it came either from the sands in Saudi Arabia or in that area, or it came from South America. So those are the only two areas. A lot of that stuff is being funneled through Mexico. There's a war. That's a serious war on drugs. A lot of guns are funneled through that area. So the guns that are on the street right here, because there's a couple handguns that are stolen, it's a very small amount. I know you've heard that's information that our former police commissioner McCall talked about. 66% of the guns in violent crimes were confiscated off the street. It was 66% of the firearms. It was actually 2 of 3 guns that was actually committed these violent crimes that were confiscated. So it wasn't this big, large number. There were 2 out of the 3 guns coming up to 66%. So I think there's a lot of misinformation that we have to address out there. I understand there's those that are going to be against firearms no matter what. I want to apply a rational, I want to be fair when we come to debate. You guys have been doing this. I think Doc is borderline. I think he's a little fundamentalist in his anti-gun, quest. But he's relatively fair. I think he's understanding on some level where we actually address this issue.
But what would you proffer as something that would be fair and balanced on this issue regarding the regulation of guns on one side and the right, and as you say, the God-given right to have weapons or possess weapons?
Well, number one, as an NRA, I guess, instructor or NRA member, I'm going to speak off the record on this point where they don't believe you have any training, believe anybody should have a firearm. As a human being, I believe firearms, like especially AR-15s and shotguns and semi-automatic pistols, I believe you need to be trained. And the NRA also believes that. That's why they're the biggest trainer in the United States in regards to firearms. They don't want you to come out and say, before I can get a firearm, I have to be trained. And I feel the same way.
But why not?
Having said that, because they don't want on the record any regulation. Even though they support that, they don't want it on a record. I believe individuals should be trained before they purchase a firearm. And I'm a part of that.
I would hope that you would, before anybody has a weapon, they know how to use it.
On the record, they don't want that, but off the record, like you said, they spend more money on training individuals across America than any other organization probably in the world.
Okay.
My thing is, why have access period to those types of weapons?
Like
The
AR-15s.
right, the average citizen. Why should the average citizen have access? I am not
Sure.
anti-gun.
I understand.
But why should the average citizen have access to those type of weapons? The AR-15s, the AK-47s, the fully automatic, not the fully automatic,
but
the
high
semi-automatic.
caliber, military style looking
High
firearms.
capacity magazines as well. Why the average citizen should have access to that?
Personally, if you look at case law, the police department or law enforcement agencies are not there to protect me or you as an individual. They're there to protect society on a whole. Until I have a personal police to protect myself or a personal federal agent stand outside my door, I want to have enough firepower to protect my family in case some criminal with an AK-47 high capacity magazine comes to confront me or my business.
You and I both know the rule is that if you can't hit nothing with 7 rounds, you only need 18 to do it.
During the Vietnam War, the average soldier fired 2,000 rounds for every 1 kill. That's just a fact.
Well, the next time we're at the Vietnam War, then I say go ahead, let's do it. But clearly we're not there. And so I'm trying to figure out what would be the purpose, as you said, for someone to have that many rounds, to have
that type of weapon,
for that kind of
A
weapon.
proportional response.
To what?
Proportional response to whatever you responded to.
So what if we had
I'm not gonna take a knife to a
what if
gunfight.
we had regulations where you did not have those, so then there'd be no proportion for you to go against somebody else.
But currently we have no regulations, so individuals have them.
Correct.
That's
and
why
so
we need
and that's why we would need regulation,
Okay.
right?
But those aren't the
You
firearms.
would agree with me.
Those
That's
are-
why we would need it.
But
If
those
we had the regulation,
Those aren't the firearms.
If we would have, if we
that
have,
commit these crimes.
okay.
Right?
I'll give you.
The
I'll let you
handgun.
off the hook tonight because you're not going to give me the answer.
I will not give you the answer you want.
He's going to give me the answer on commercial break. But you know, I agree with you that I don't necessarily believe that people should not have weapons if they feel, if one, they're responsible, two, they're not crazy, and it's really to defend who they,
Correct.
who they have. I don't have a problem with that necessarily. What I have a problem with is anyone who will argue that there's an unfettered right to have it.
Okay.
And I just don't believe that there's an unfettered right to have that. I think that there should be some regulation. Our community can afford to not have regulation, whether it's here in the Virgin Islands or in the United States of America.
To add to that, I think that's the reason why we're seeing it the way we are now, because it's went so long. It's gone on so long without the regulation, the necessary regulation to keep that at bay, to keep it in place.
But
now
those-
without the hand
those
currently, and
firearms-
that's what you may need.
You're right, absolutely. Those firearms have been strictly regulated to the point where they just didn't issue it. And I think it was illegal because when they got challenged in different, challenged by a lawyer or challenged by courts, they were issuing these type of firearms. On the mainland, it's not even challenged. It's just an unfettered right almost,
Right.
as you would say.
Especially in Texas.
But having said that, right, is being so strictly regulated here, why so many crimes is being committed by the AK-47 and by the fully automatic firearms? My heart goes out to the Vosges Police Department, men and women, because they are so, not understaffed, they're so under-resourced. Where I know personally, even though they were trained with tasers, not every police officer have a taser. And they're facing a
and those who have it don't even know how to use it
right.
well.
And they're facing a violent criminal element with a handgun and with low caliber rifles. Only a few of them have the semi-automatic rifles that some of the civilians on the street have.
They're
And I think that's absolutely, but whose fault is that? So let's go to the root cause once again. That's a leadership problem. We need to address that.
But I can tell you, I know some police. I've seen some police officers. I don't want them with a weapon.
That's true.
And
They shouldn't be a police officer.
Right. They shouldn't. Right. They shouldn't even be police
We have
officers.
police officers that have murdered people
So
on the streets, right?
So I want it to be where even in that realm of law enforcement, that there's we have the kind of background checks and the kind of things that we really need to have. I know they say we have them, but I don't think we go far enough when we're putting trust into officers to protect entire society.
Because we're looking for bodies to fill a position.
Just to fill the positions of officers.
And it's wrong. And that's
right.
wrong.
Right.
No, but can I ask a question? Let's put it into historical context. We know on the movies, America has been portrayed as a gun culture.
Yes.
But was that truly the pervasive culture of America? And if you think about even modern America, let's say if modern America began at about 1962 to now,
Okay.
was it a gun culture per se?
No, it was a rope culture.
That too. That's why you needed a gun culture to prevent the rope culture.
Right.
And you see, and
But
that
those who needed the
and
those who needed the gun
and
culture
who
have
brought
access to
and
it.
think about it,
Exactly.
wasn't the development of the gun culture in retaliation of the people who were trying to rebuff the rope culture?
It's hard to say. You know, Condoleezza Rice says the Second Amendment's an absolute
I want her
right.
to think Condoleezza Rice
But I gotta bring it up.
because she the lie.
No, but still.
And we know she lies as a result of what occurred with that invasion in Iraq. So I could hear less what Condoleezza Rice
Let
said.
the big man
But you
speak.
can go ahead and
Go
say
ahead.
it.
I like
Just know I'm not listening
I
to
like
it.
Condoleezza. I respect
Well,
her.
very
I think,
good for you.
she's an intelligent Black American woman.
That lies.
A whole lot of them lies.
And caused thousands of people to die.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
But needless to say, she said, you know, her family was being attacked. Obviously, it's kind of a racist confrontation. Her neighbors came to their defense and stood their ground and defended their lives with firearms.
Right.
To her, it was very.
And why couldn't her
absolutely
father? Why couldn't her father defend
Her
them?
father was a part of that. He just was only one of them.
He was what?
He was just probably one of them, but he needed more. When you come in a mob, that's why he needed an AR-15.
And why was a mob coming for him?
I assumed there was some type of racist, some type of racist
So,
retaliation.
you know, but that's why I talk about the rebuff. So when you have a development of because the rope culture, and then when Black America started to rebuff them with the same use of the Second Amendment, then you
Absolutely.
see
The Black Panthers, Tupac
Oh,
Shakur.
I mean, but you see
They're
that
very knowledgeable of the firearm culture and use it to their benefit.
cool. And so they try to restrain the Black firearm culture and the resurgence of a predominant white firearm
They
culture.
tried to, they did.
Yes,
Right, because
California.
historically, let's remember that this whole argument, this right to bear arms and pushing for that came as a result of Black Panthers saying that we have a right to bear our arms.
Absolutely.
And so only then did we start flipping the script
And say-
on, oh, we need to have all these regulations. Because now people recognize that, wait a minute, this right to bear arms don't apply to you alone, it applies to me too.
Right.
And I should have the right to have it done.
But John also mentioned it's a human right
Yeah.
to own, to possess our
But we're
property.
3/5.
But
Protect
George
yourself.
Bush,
Protect yourself.
but George Bush didn't believe that when he disarmed Saddam Hussein and then went into Iraq, and the man didn't have any weapons to defend himself.
About that.
That's true. But that's another show.
Okay.
Hey, what about
Because-
what about the show on the Fast and the Furious and the Iran-Contra affairs?
Right.
We talk about weapons being in Iran before,
course.
in overseas and all of that, but none of I mean, where do you point the fingers? Where's the root cause? How do you solve it? That's my thing.
In our community, it's going to take education, mentorship, and I think every male should have a living wage times 1 or 2 or 3,
And-
so he can provide for his family and himself. And I think we'll see violence and all the other idiosyncrasies in our society actually start
Well,
to be
John,
And I like that assessment.
John, I
I'm
want to
telling
thank
you,
you for coming on the show tonight.
it's always
been
a pleasure.
wonderful show. I thank you all for being with us. I hope that you've learned something. And I'm sure we'll have some more shows on this discussion.
Sure.
So thank you for being on the show. We want to thank as well as Dr. Peterson for being on the show with us. Good night, and remember to let your voices be heard.